Liz, thank you for inviting us to be here today. We're really grateful to be part of these webinar Wednesdays. And I'll go ahead and just jump right in. So welcome. Thank you for joining us here today. Today we'll be talking about Be Smart, a program developed by Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America and supported by Washington State PTA to bring together parents and all adults concerned about kids, guns, and safety. Carolyn and I are volunteers with the Washington State chapter of Moms Demand Action and are trained Be Smart presenters. My name is Jenna, and I'm a PTA parent to 2 elementary-aged kids here in the Tahoma district. I joined Moms Demand Action in 2018 because I wanted to see change and help make a safer world for my kids and all our children. I got involved with the Be Smart program when I realized that protecting our kids from gun violence really starts in the home and that every adult can play a role in keeping our kids safe.
My name is Carolyn Nissen. I have 1 child in middle school, and like so many, I was compelled to join Moms Demand Action after the Parkland shooting. I have a background in teaching young children and felt Be Smart was a program that should be shared everywhere. In the US, firearms are the 2nd leading cause of death for children and the 1st leading cause of death for Black children. As this slide shows, nearly 1,600 children under the age of 18 are killed with guns in the US every year. That's an average of 4 children every day. When children in America are killed with guns, the majority of those deaths, 52%, are homicides. That's almost 800 children per year. Additionally, 600 die by firearm suicide, and 100 are unintentionally shot. We know that approximately 4.6 million children in the US live in a household with at least 1 loaded, unlocked gun. While school shootings and mass shootings typically make national headlines, the reality is that for children under the age of 13, gun homicides are most frequently occur in the home. One study showed that nearly 90% of unintentional shooting deaths and injuries among children under the age of 15 are at home. That's what's more, we know that in incidents of gunfire on school grounds, 80% of the shooters under 18 obtain the gun from home or the home of a friend or relative. I know this is emotional and we may come from different walks of life. Many are parents, some are gun owners, some are not. You may have had a personal experience with guns, and some of you may have even been impacted by gun violence yourself. We believe that most gun owners want to be responsible. So we're here to talk today about what all of us, gun owners and non-gun owners alike, can do to make sure children don't have unsupervised access to guns.
For now, let's leave politics at the door and agree on these 3 things. 1, we all want kids to grow up happy and healthy. 2, we each have the right to make responsible decisions about how to protect our homes, families, and communities, including whether or not to have a gun in the home. And 3, if we can prevent even 1 child gun death or injury, it's our responsibility to do so. We're not here to talk about laws or policies, so let's set those aside. I want to take a few minutes to talk specifically about what the consequences of unsecured guns looks like. On this slide, you'll see just a few headlines from stories from across the country, although we know there are many incidents that go unreported. Some of you may remember from the news the first story in the top left. In January of 2018, there was a school shooting in Kentucky at Marshall County High School. More than a dozen students were shot and wounded. 2 of them, Bailey Holt and Preston Cope, were killed. The 16-year-old shooter had gained access to his stepfather's unsecured pistol from his bedroom. The next tragedy took place in May of 2018. A 4-year-old boy from Louisa, Virginia, unintentionally shot his 2-year-old brother Tyson after accessing an unsecured gun that was kept high in an upper cabinet. The next headline on the bottom left illustrates that when kids are looking to carry guns out of fear, easy access to guns can help facilitate the cycle of violence. Like 17-year-old Zeke of Jackson, Mississippi, who told the Jackson Free Press that some young people in his community carry guns out of fear of being robbed or shot and believe that having a gun will allow them to defend themselves. Let me also point out our final story about 13-year-old Mikey from Brewster, New York. Mikey was a friendly, popular 8th grader. He was an expert bowler, an avid athlete, and he loved video games. In January 2013, Mikey came home from school and took one of his father's unlocked loaded guns and shot himself. His family knew Mikey to be a happy kid, and they don't believe he had planned to die that day. But with easy access to a loaded gun, Mikey made an impulsive decision that tragically became a fatal one. These tragedies can happen in any community. Earlier this year in Federal Way, a 9-year-old girl shot herself in the abdomen while at home. The parents reported it was an unintentional shooting. And in early 2019, a 4-year-old boy in Renton found a gun hidden under a mattress and unintentionally shot his pregnant mother in the face. The gun belonged to the boy's father, who had recently borrowed it for protection. All of these stories show the potential fallout of when young people get their hands on unsecured guns. No story is quite the same, but all are tragic and all are preventable.
It's important to remember that even if you are practicing responsible storage, or if you don't have a gun in your home, you can't be sure about other homes. You can't be sure about how responsible other people are being. And that's where our Be Smart program is helpful. What can we do? We can learn to be smart. Let's start with S, secure your guns in homes and vehicles. 13 million households with children contain at least one gun. The majority of children in the house know where the gun is stored. And we already know that in incidents of gunfire on school grounds, majority of the shooters under the age of 18 obtain the guns from their homes or the homes of a relative. Like the tragedy that unfolded in Marshall County High School in Kentucky that we touched on earlier. So what do I mean by securing guns? Guns should be stored, locked, and unloaded with ammunition stored separately. Hiding a gun is not securing a gun. We know that that can lead to a tragedy. We talked about the 4-year-old Virginia boy who unintentionally shot his 2-year-old brother after accessing an unsecured gun that was just stored up high in a cabinet. I remember Zeke from Mississippi, who spoke of the complicated safety reasons that push teens in his area to want a gun. Keep in mind that kids may feel a variety of emotions about guns, from curiosity, fascination, to fear. As adults, it's our responsibility to prevent easy access. Research also finds that secure storage is associated with decreased risk of firearm suicide and unintentional injuries. One study showed that households that locked both firearms and ammunition had 78% lower risk of self-inflicted firearm injuries among children and teenagers, and 85% lower risk of unintentional firearm injuries. Unsecured guns also contribute to the staggering number of guns stolen every year. An estimated 380,000 guns are stolen from private gun owners every year. The gun owners were 3 times more likely to have a gun stolen if they'd carried in the last month. Researchers also suggest that nearly 1/4 of stolen guns are taken from cars. So storing a gun in a glove box or underneath a seat is not considered responsible storage. Some commonly used secure storage practices include a cable lock, a lockbox, or a firearm safe, as well as storing firearms unloaded with ammunition stored separately. We will provide a link in the chat to the King County Lock It Up program that describes various firearm locking devices. And I'm going to add that right now.
M, model responsible behavior. Every law-abiding adult has the right to decide whether or not to have a gun in the home. But you can't rely on curious kids not to find a gun. As we saw on the slide before, one study showed that the majority of children are aware of where their parents store their guns, and that more than 1/3 reported handling their parents' guns, many doing so without the knowledge of their parents. Nearly 1/4 of parents did not know that their children had handled the gun in their home. It is always an adult's responsibility to prevent unauthorized access to guns, not a curious child's responsibility to avoid guns. Talk to your kids about gun safety, but remember, That's a precaution, not a guarantee. One study found that young children who go through a week-long gun safety training are just as likely as children with no training to approach or play with a handgun when they find one. Modeling responsible behavior means that smart adults make sure that kids don't have the opportunity to access guns. That said, you can't control the environment that your child is in all the time. So you should teach them not to touch a gun if they come across one, real or pretend, and give them the tools to get out of a dangerous situation and to alert an adult. As an adult, it's your responsibility to do everything you can to prevent them from getting into a dangerous situation to begin with. We have a link on best practices for talking to children and teens about guns that we'll share in the chat. As we have mentioned, there are approximately 4.6 million US children living in a household with at least one loaded, unlocked gun. According to Washington State Department of Health, an estimated 55,000 children in Washington live in a household with loaded and unlocked firearms. That's why you need to ask about firearms in other homes your child visits, the A in SMART. I'd like to ask parents and caretakers to take a moment and think about some of the things you might typically ask about before allowing your child to visit another home. You may have thought of potential allergens, pets in the home, pools or trampolines on the property, car seats for rides, who will be home for play dates or teen events, TV and screen time, electronics, video games, or access to alcohol. Asking about guns in the home should be as natural as asking about any other safety issue, but it can seem awkward at first. So try making it part of your general safety conversation. You might try asking via email or text if you're uncomfortable at first. We have a resource on asking about secure storage with more information. We will share this in the chat.
Let's talk about recognizing the role of guns in suicide, the R in SMART, be smart. Access to gun may mean difference between life and death. We saw that in Mikey's story. As your children get older, you may need to consider taking another look at your storage methods. If you've been using a simple cable lock, you may want to think about getting a gun safe. We all know how curious children can be. So as they get older and more resourceful, we need to act accordingly. Also, if you know your loved one is in distress, you might want to consider temporarily removing the gun from your home. Take this information into consideration. Most people who attempt suicide do not die unless they use a gun. In fact, 90% of suicide attempts with a gun result in death, a much higher fatality rate than other means of self-harm. This contributes to the fact that 40% of child suicides involve a gun. If you consider temporarily removing a gun from your home, there are several options. Law enforcement may be willing to temporarily store the gun for you. Some licensed gun dealers and gun ranges may be willing to store, or you could temporarily store the guns at a home of a friend or family member. To manage risk for that friend or family member, you should lock any guns that you transfer and not provide the key or code. We will place the link in the chat that provides local, temporary, and voluntary storage options for people in crisis. Based on 2017 National Youth Surveys conducted by the CDC, 17% of high school students surveyed had seriously considered attempting suicide in the prior year. Currently, the CDC estimates that 1 in 4 people under the age of 18 struggle with suicidal thoughts since the beginning of the pandemic. Based on 2019 survey here in Washington, 18% of 10th graders reported considering suicide, 12 reported having a plan, and 7 reported attempting suicide. In an average week in Washington state, approximately 3 young people between the ages of 10 and 24 kill themselves, and 17 adolescents are admitted to the hospital for not unsuccessful suicidal behavior. One national study showed that 41% of adolescents in gun-owning households report having easy access. As stated earlier, research shows that responsible firearm storage is associated with decreased risk of child firearm suicide. The next slide has more information about how to get help if you recognize any warning signs of suicide that includes the Suicide Prevention Hotline. If you know someone who is in crisis and may have access to a firearm, you may also want to look into an Extreme Risk Protection Order, an ERPO. Family or household members and law enforcement may obtain an ERPO when there is evidence that a person poses a significant danger, including danger because of mental health crisis or violent behavior. The purpose and intent is to reduce gun deaths and injuries through order temporarily restricting the person's access to any firearms. In the chat, we will also provide a link to the Washington State's Protection Order website, ERPO Help. It may help you decide if ERPO is right for you.
T, tell. That is the power of being smart. We have heard from people that because of Be Smart, they know to ask about the presence of guns before their children go to other people's homes. That they have talked to family members about guns in the home when they have recognized the role of guns in suicide. And that gun owners are modeling responsible behavior as a direct result of Be Smart. It's important the people who own and work with guns are a part of this conversation. Research shows that law enforcement, the military, and hunting or outdoor groups are particularly effective at communicating secure storage practices. So, who are you going to tell to be smart today?
To review what we have talked about today, we'll play a short video.
We each come from different walks of life.
I'm the retired police chief of the St. Louis Police Department.
Soy consejera bilingüe. I do a lot of writing. I write a lot of poetry.
So I've known since I was very young that I wanted to be a pediatrician.
I'm a dad, and I love to study history. And firearms are a way for me to access that history.
Soy madre, soy esposa.
My dad, my husband.
I'm a mother, an advocate,
and I'm a proud military wife and mother.
As parents, we all agree
that raising happy, healthy children
es lo más importante para todos nosotros.
And right now, we're dealing with a major national public health issue.
My son was at his uncle's house playing with his 13-year-old cousin when his 13-year-old cousin found a gun that was unsecured in a drawer, not realizing that one of the bullets was still in the chamber. So when Jawan told him to put the gun away, he said, "Look, it's not loaded," and pulled the trigger. In approximately 17 minutes, my son was gone.
So many of these deaths are unintentional. And when that happens to everybody involved, it's devastating.
anytime a young person dies, you think to yourself that, this is something that could have been prevented.
I don't think I ever thought I would see a child with a gunshot injury. But yes, we have all seen them, unfortunately.
He was my all. When I look in the back seat now, it's empty. And that's what I'm used to seeing. I'm used to seeing him.
Nearly 1,500 American children are killed by guns every year.
A leading cause of death for children in America.
As adults, we are responsible for our children, and there are 5 simple things we can do
To keep them healthy.
Secure and store your guns locked and unloaded and separate from ammunition.
Most guns used in school shootings come from the home.
Practica comportamiento responsable.
Talk to your kids about gun safety, but remember, that's a precaution, not a guarantee.
Ask family members and other parents if there are any unsecured guns in their homes,
Es tan fácil como mandar un texto o correo electrónico.
and it could save a life.
Recognize the role of guns in suicide.
If you think your kid is at risk, make sure all your guns are stored or just get them out of the house.
Tell as many people as you can to be smart.
So to recap, secure, model, ask, recognize, and tell as many people as you can. Be smart.
Necesitamos hacer mejor.
I store my guns responsibly, and I ask my neighbors and my friends to do the same thing.
Whether or not it's your gun, it could be your child.
Es responsabilidad de todos.
We can't afford to stay silent.
So you all have the power to continue to save lives by remembering that you can be smart.
Thank you so much for spending time with us here today.
I'm just going to switch my screen back here really quick. If you have any questions about the presentation or about gun safety in general, please feel free to use the Q&A feature. And the references slide is provided here in case anyone in the audience has questions about the sources for any of the content in the presentation. Please visit besmartforkids.org for access to more resources.
Thank you so much. This is super informative and beneficial. So I know we have some folks that have experienced some things personally, and so I was listening to it with that lens. And we do have a couple questions and I'll read those. And so we have one that says, how can I get into sharing my story like this? I need the world to know so they know it's a serious issue.
Thank you for that question. So there is a group called the Everytown Survivor Network that you can join, and they do a lot of kind of outreach like that, where as a survivor, you're able to share your story if that's something that you would like to do. And I will go ahead, I don't know, do I have the option to put, yeah, I'll go ahead and put my email address in the chat here. And you can contact me and I can get you in touch with someone if you would like.
Just make sure it goes to panelists and attendees.
Okay, did that work?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect.
Okay. And then would you mind putting the besmartforkids.org going to panelists and attendees? And then I have a second question, and it's how can I become a Be Smart presenter in the Seattle area?
So that would be through Moms Demand Action. And we do have a local group that meets in, well, right now we're meeting virtually, but we meet in Issaquah and Snoqualmie. And again, if you want to email me, I would love to get you in touch with our group, and we would love to have you come to one of our meetings. And we do offer the Be Smart training through Moms Demand Action.
Wonderful. And is it, do you have presenters that are male and female, so moms and dads?
Not in our small local group, we do not, but we would love that. Moms is for everyone. You don't have to be a mom. You don't have to be female. It's for everyone. So
perfect. So,
yeah.
So if we had a male who wanted to do some of these presentations, please email, because your story is critical and could help save a life. So
absolutely.
There are men in the group, so we should probably be recruiting them.
Wonderful.
That's a good question.
And there are in the Survivor Network. So the Survivor Network kind of works with Moms Demand, part of the Everytown for gun safety, kind of under their umbrella. And so there are male survivors that share stories sometimes at our meetings or at other events. And it seems like it's a really tightly knit group of individuals. So I would definitely recommend looking into it if you're interested.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions for our panelists today? Well, great. If you have know someone who wanted to be here and they couldn't be here, this will be loaded up on YouTube tomorrow on the on my wellness channel. And so I'll send out an email to everyone who registered and let them know where they can find that, and feel free and pass that along to any other folks that you feel like would benefit for this information. And Jenna and Carolyn, thank you so much for being here on a beautiful sunny day, doing your thing and giving us the really, really critical information that we need to keep our kids safe. Any last things to add to the group before we go?
I'll just add a couple of pieces of advice. Usually when we do these presentations live in person, most of the questions we get revolve around the ask portion, because it can be a little bit intimidating. People don't always know how to approach that. And so I would just say, first of all, I've been doing this for about 3 years now. And when I first started, my kids were little and just starting to be able to go on play dates. And I felt like I was the only one asking that question. And even over the last 2 to 3 years, I've had other people ask me, or when I've asked them, they've told me, oh my gosh, I always ask that question now. So it's just part of it's about normalizing this conversation. The more that you ask, the more other people are going to feel comfortable asking. And we're just going to normalize this question in our culture because it's so important to keep our kids safe. So I just wanted to point that out. And then, if you do get an answer that you're uncomfortable with, maybe someone doesn't want to share whether they have a gun or how they store their guns, you can always offer to host the play date. Instead, just let them know, I'm not comfortable with that. My child is very curious. I prefer to have it at my house. Or you can offer to go to a neutral location like the park or playground, something like that. So just, kind of have a plan of like what you're going to say if you get an answer you're not comfortable with. And then again, going back to the normalizing, like I always just offer, we don't personally own guns. So I just offer that when we invite someone over to our house, like we, let them know we do have dogs, make sure they're comfortable with that. And then, just let them know we don't have guns. Or if you do have guns, just let them know we take safety very seriously and they're stored, locked, and unloaded. So again, just making that part of your normal safety conversation that you're having.
And I have a middle schooler, and we've been doing this since preschool because we live in an area where people are hunting and they're going out, and it's pretty common. And we still ask, even though he's, Mom, can't you just drop me off? It's like, yep, but I'm going to the door and I'm gonna ask some questions. And they're like, okay. But and he's more aware of it now too. Like he will even, I think one house he was at, he didn't feel comfortable, so he called me and asked me to come and ask, which I was like really proud of him for that.
Yeah.
I don't want to go downstairs because I don't like what's down there. And I was like, okay. So I think involving your kids is really important too.
Yeah, and
Giving them voice for their safety.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And as they're older, teenagers, just make sure you have that conversation so they do have a plan if they're in a situation they don't feel comfortable. Like that example Carolyn just gave,
He just texted
you
me.
always text me and just say, or even say, Mom, can you call me and tell me?
Make up a reason.
Oh.
He was just like, text me. It's like, okay.
And I would say that in any situation that our kids are in, if we can give them voice and choice so they can make great decisions for themselves, and, be willing to step out. I mean, what a legacy that we leave for our kids, right? So thank you for your important work. Thank you for our attendees that came today, and go out and have a wonderful sunny day, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.